Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Future of BizTech. I'm your host, JC Granger, and I have another fantastic guest on the show today. And if you end up loving this episode, again, please show your love and appreciation and follow the podcast wherever you are listening. Give it a 5-star review and some comments, because that is how techies like us find cool podcasts like this. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Mark Stouse, the CEO of Proof Analytics. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what it is that you guys do.
Hey, thanks so much. So Proof Analytics basically has taken classic multivariable regression analytics, right? And we've automated the living heck out of it to solve what most people consider to be the biggest problem with analytics today. And that is it can't really keep up with the clock speed of the business, right? So if you think about data science, the math is usually awesome. All that kind of stuff is happening, but it's happening so slowly. The latency on the answers that data scientists provide the business is so slow, so high, right? That by the time they get it to the business can't do anything with it. It's like in the past already, right? Sure. So the whole purpose of analytics, from one perspective anyway, certainly from the business leader perspective, is to look down the road, right? Look around the corners, and particularly in the marketplace that we're in today, the macro being what it is, the incredible volatility that we're experiencing, the high speed change that we're experiencing. That's really what business leaders care about the most, is being able to forecast and then immediately, in whatever speed or latency is relevant to their business, recompute that model and confirm that the forecast was either on or off, and why is it off, and what can we do to bring it back on, right? I mean, that's essentially the nut of it, right?
So, well, I mean, I saw on your website, I was doing some research and, looking and whatnot, and it had a big Salesforce component here, it looked like, as well. So, I mean, is that kind of your perfect client, just the types of companies who are using Salesforce, or is that just a main target that you guys have? How does that integrate?
Yeah, Salesforce is a huge partner for us. We actually have two products. I was really talking about the analytics product. We also have, if there's kind of analytics, there's also accountability. And so we have a marketing ERP. It's called an MRM tool, marketing resource management tool. That's the category that it's in. And this is planning, budgeting, asset management. It's all the stuff that you would normally expect to find in ERP for any function inside of a corporation, but very focused on marketing. And so we are also unique right now in that we have the only one that is native on Salesforce. So if you are already a Salesforce customer and you're looking for an MRM, we are your choice. I mean, that
plug and play. They can just go to the Salesforce marketplace, boom, boom, and it's already integrated. That's really cool.
Automatic data sync. If you've got subscriptions to 3 or 4 different Salesforce clouds, and there's data in those clouds that you want to have in the MRM tool, as soon as you turn it on, I would say within 30 minutes after you turn on Proof MRM, all that data is there.
It's already collecting.
Already collected.
Is there already default data? Is it already putting them into visual, like logical areas for them to go, holy crap, we can actually see this right now?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, like, unless somebody wants a lot of customization, and that does happen, but I would say most customers implement it initially right out of the box. Mm-hmm. And that's like a 30-40 day process, as opposed to over a year for a lot of other MRM tools. The implementation costs are maybe 50 to 60, 70 grand, as opposed to over $1 million, $1.5 million for a lot of other tools. So we're talking about a very significant paradigm shift when you're talking about Proof, right?
That's a massive savings, right? Like, I work with a lot of, I work with tech companies almost exclusively. And so I'll have clients that are what I call platform dependent softwares, right? So they like in health tech, right? That's a big thing right now. you get a hospital on your software, no matter what it does, for the most part, that's almost a permanent placement, right? But it's a big enterprise deal. Costs a lot of money to get it integrated, but once they're in, they're
Right.
not going anywhere. It's almost permanent revenue for them, right? And from what you're saying, it sounds like that you've created an alternative to these huge, ERP costs. And I mean, the integration costs are massive typically, right? And the time frame. And you're telling the audience here and me, Scout's honor, that when they click to integrate this on Salesforce, it just works.
Yeah, because it's native on Lightning, right?
Wow.
So, I mean, there's one. So right now, the only Salesforce cloud that is not native on Lightning is the Marketing Cloud, right? So, but that's being rewritten right now for Lightning. So we have another way of integrating with that one. So it's still, flawless, seamless. It's totally good. But when Marketing Cloud is published again on Lightning, it's going to be, the total deal.
Sure. So what types of companies do you find are getting the most use out of your product? Like what industries and size companies do you find are using what you do your platform, or I'm sorry, your analytics the most?
It's not really industry specific at all, because the math is the math and the business questions are the business questions, right? And everybody kind of has their little take on it, right? But that doesn't really change anything in terms of like our platform, right?
Sure.
So I would say that our ICP are very mature companies when it comes to data and analytics, who are looking for significant savings and leverage economically. So they may be doing a lot of the stuff that Proof is automated, but they're doing it the old way, right? And it's very expensive. Like when I was CMO at Honeywell Aerospace, I was spending $6, $7, $8 million a year on analytics, mainly people, right?
Yeah.
And that's not where it's headed, right? It's not that people aren't going to be a critical part of the equation. They always will be, but we exist to speed them up, right?
Sure.
We're giving data scientists and business leaders not only a bridge to talk and understand each other better and to deliver the results that one of them really needs from the other one, but also to do it very, very fast and very low cost, right? So that is, so I would say upper part of the mid-tier all the way up through the top of the enterprise segments would be our main addressable market. And within that, the ICP are people who are more mature. I mean, when we have a first meeting, we ask a few questions that are designed to help people understand, am I really a candidate for Proof, right?
Sure.
Because that's
which industries do you find have that overwhelming amount of data that really does need to be filtered out and look visually, right? I mean, like healthcare, manufacturing, right? I can see those two being high data industries. Is there any other ones that you find that get pretty good use out of this from that massive amount of data standpoint?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that's been kind of interesting about all this is that most business people think that big data, the term big data, is synonymous with I have a lot of data, and it's not.
Okay, good point.
Right? Big data is a particular type of data, and there's two competing visions of this. You either check all 5 boxes or all 7 boxes for a particular data set, and that makes it big data or not. And a lot of AI and machine learning, and again, these terms are also evolving in terms of what people think they mean. Those are big data solutions. And to be perfectly honest with you, most of what business leaders want to know is not a big data problem. So it can be it can really be answered, or their interests can be served with what's called lean data.
Mhm.
right? And they're not really as interested in pattern recognition, although they are, right? As they are cause and effect, right? They want to understand, okay, I'm doing these 12 things and I believe that I'm doing them because they deliver this kind of impact, right? But I have no idea which of these 12 is the most effective, right? And I also don't understand how they combine together to get me there, right? And I also have no idea how long it takes. So this is a concept called time lag, right?
Got it.
And if you don't know the time lag, you will never find the value in the calendar.
So it sounds like this, and I like that you pointed out amount of data versus big data, right? So it sounds like it's a difference between volume and density, right? It sounds like you guys really unpack dense data and
correct.
show it in an easier way, right? Because I can have easy data and have a lot of it, but that, I don't need a board for a big giant analytics for that, right? If it's two different parallel points and there's just a lot of it, it's like, okay, well, it's just 2 bars on a graph, like no big deal, right? But you're saying dense data essentially, where it's so many different complex components.
But also I would say this, I mean, like, this is really key. You can look at an NBA score, right? So that's two numbers, right? And that'll tell you who won and who lost, but that is all it will tell you.
Yeah.
Right? It will not tell you why. It will not tell you the likelihood of that happening again. So this is the issue with data by itself. Data by itself is fuel for analytics, right? Data is always in the past and it's static, right? Because it's already happened. You've measured it. It's done, right? Analytics is all relational and dynamic, and it's showing you these relationships. And as everything changes and moves around, and the macro changes and all this kind of stuff, it's actually really great analytics works a lot like a GPS. And most business problems are essentially navigation problems, right? It's like, hey, I'm here. I want to go here. This is my goal, right? And I've got a forecast, so that's my route to value. Sticking with the GPS analogy, right? And it's tracking my progress, and it's tracking all these other variables that are swirling around me that will either speed me up or slow me down or make me have a wreck or whatever, right? And it will then say, oops, you know what? You need to change course, right? You need to shift. You need to turn right, turn left. You need to speed up, slow down, whatever it is, right? To stay on course and ultimately achieve your goal. That's why we often refer to, not just us, it's a fairly common data science reference, that business questions are usually navigation questions.
So what motivated you to start the company? I mean, you were the CMO at a previous company, and you were dealing with this stuff from that point of view. What made you just throw your hands up and say, you know what, screw it, I'm doing my own thing here? Like, what was the big problem that you saw no one else really solving?
Well, it's this, right? What we're talking about. I mean, so I had gotten to a very high degree of maturity with my organization at Honeywell around being analytics led, right? So, and we were very successful as a global marketing team doing that, so much so that, we were featured in some earnings calls and, all that kind of stuff, right? But it costs a lot of money, right? And the main reason why it costs a lot of money was we had to overhire the staff, the data science staff, in order to get the speed of recalculation of models to where it was on par with the clock speed of the business, right? Because we wanted to be able to say, okay, this is what we're seeing materializing out there in the medium future, right? And that's either something that's really good that we want to do more of, create more value by the time we get to that point in the calendar, or that's not so hot. We need to make some changes so that we don't get to that point in the calendar, right? Mm-hmm. And so automation, it was super obvious that automation was going to be a big part of this, particularly since, like most marketing organizations, most business organizations have a lot of data, but not any big data. So this was not really an AI centric problem. And so it was multivariable regression is really what it is, that's a type of math that essentially is the most common form of data science. It's what's used to investigate, I don't know, most data scientists would say 80 to 85% of the world's questions are answered with multivariable regression. And so automating it, making it faster to model, create the models, where then the models become autonomous, right? They're hooked up to the data flows, and every time new data rolls into the model, it automatically recalcs the model. And so you're just constantly at whatever the relevant speed is for your business, right? You're getting an update. Mm-hmm. So retail companies would probably do it hour by hour, right? Sure. But Honeywell Aerospace would do it monthly.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just that this is also where it's very contextual.
So how are you getting? Well, first, how long have you guys been around? How long have you been in business?
About 5.5 years. But like 3.5 we had some early customers, but we were not marketing it, we were not selling it, we were developing it, right? So
and I'm a marketing guy, right? So I was curious, what are you guys doing right now? Other than obviously you're doing podcasts, right? So that's one thing. You're doing some PR, right? You get on the shows and people get to hear what you guys are doing, which is great. Other than that, what other things do you guys typically do to get the clients? Or do you just simply exist and stay in the Salesforce platform and allow the inbound, or are you guys a little more aggressive? Do you guys do paid marketing or email and stuff like that? Like, just curious what a company of your stature does to drum up that overall business.
Sure, I would say that right now about 50% of our business comes from either Salesforce or AWS. Mm-hmm. We do all of the classic stuff. I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel here in terms of our outbound marketing. We are also right in the middle of the market has never been more open to what analytics generally has to offer, and proof in particular has to offer, than right now. That really started with the beginning of COVID. Mm-hmm. And then it just kept on going. I mean, so for the last 3 years, it's just been kind of crazy.
Well, it saves big companies a lot of money, right? Because it tells a story they weren't looking at before. I mean, everything was kind of bloated, in my opinion, before, but it didn't matter, right? Like the train was running fast and everyone was going wee with their hands in the air. It didn't matter, right? They didn't care about leakage and these little things. But when you hit something like COVID, and every single dollar counts now, and every single, you need analytics to tell you, where am I bleeding and where am I gaining, right? So 100% agree. And actually that segues into my next question, which is the main question I always have on my show, because the future of biz tech, I want to know where things are going. So, you've been in this business so long. I'd like to know first, the first question is, where do you see the industry you're in? Let's just say the analytics industry in general. Where do you see that going in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see any major shifts on the horizon, whether it be legally, politically, culturally, technology wise? Where do you see the industry, you and your competitors, like affecting you all going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, for example, let's take data for a second, right? I mean, I think that regardless of whether we're talking about the EU or California or somebody else that might pop up, right? Privacy is going to be even more restrictive on data. Fortunately, what we do is not impacted by that at all, because we're not using PII. In fact, whether you're doing
define that for the audience, just for the
personally identifiable information, right? So we are, whether you're doing regression modeling by hand or doing it in proof, you're not dealing with PII, right? So that right there is a huge advantage that we have going forward. We are essentially future-proofed on that issue. And I think that we're, I was just reading, I don't know, within the last 2 weeks, where under pressure from the macro, a lot of EU companies are violating the law on data, right? So in Europe, right? And so we are basically saying, wow, you know what? We're under the gun so bad, we're just going to take the risk, right? And we're gonna just reach out to people. So what's going to happen? What's already happening, according to this article, is a lot of whistleblower action going on, right? A lot of consumer complaints and a lot of comebacks from the European Union agencies that enforce it, that basically say, okay, you know what? We've tried to be nice about all this, and now we're getting ready to really,
Put the hammer down. Yeah.
Put the hammer down, not only on companies, but on individual marketers, if we can find evidence of their culpability, right?
Sure.
So they're talking in ways that, whether or not they'll be able to do that is another story, but they're talking about essentially the only way to do that is to criminalize the activity, because of the shield that a corporation usually provides for its employees. So it will be very interesting to see how that happens. So I think that that's going to be a big part of it. I also think that there's a concept that was originated in the 1950s, mainly for combat pilots, but has spread out all over the place, called OODA, OODA. It stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And it's the speed. The key thing about OODA is how fast can you move through those letters, right? So if you remember in Top Gun, right, speed is life, I feel the need for speed, right, all this kind of stuff. That is because you're, as you're dogfighting and you're doing all this stuff and, at very high speeds, it's your ability to move through OODA that keeps you alive and keeps you on mission, right?
That quick reaction ability, yeah.
Quick reaction ability. And so this is why, the current generation of fighter aircraft has a lot of automation, a lot of AI on board, right? To offload all these important but secondary and tertiary decisions, move it away from the human being so that the human being can focus, right? Same thing is happening in business, right? We're seeing more and more volatility, all this stuff, right? People are starting to really realize that 2/3 of what matters to their performance is stuff that they do not control. So we are all kind of surfing a wave. We do not control the wave, right? The only thing that really matters, that keeps us finishing strong, upright on the board, on the beach, right, is our ability to gauge what the wave is doing at any particular moment and react appropriately to it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's business today. That's life today, in one way, at least. And so businesses are going to say more and more and more, this is what we need, because if you look at financial data, that's a lagging indicator. And by the time you have the financial data, it's too late to do anything about it, right? And the only way that you can really determine what the true leading indicators are is through analytics.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, then let's segue then into your particular company itself. So same question, but where do you see Proof Analytics, let's say in the next, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and specifically, if you have anything on the roadmap that's launching soon, my audience does like to get the inside scoop on that. Do you got anything coming up? I have to ask.
Yeah, my guys would kill me if I did that. So
there is a delay in this recording to when it publishes, so you do have some time, and you can give them the heads up. I mean, what's on the horizon for you guys, and where do you see the company going in general?
So I think that the big opportunity going forward is removing more and more of the friction for the business user, so that the business user can look at analytics screens and say, wow, I totally understand what's happening, and I can make a better decision over and over and over again using this analytical information than I otherwise could, right? And that I'm comfortable with it, and that it's transparently delivered. So it's not just me that has this, all my colleagues have the same thing. And so, whether you think of that as UX or, however you want to think about that, that's where we're really headed right now. I think we have a really strong UX for business users. Most analytics software dumbs down the analyst screens for the business user, right? The biggest issue, though, and this is something that repeats a lot, is that most business users hate graphs and things like that. They have I think largely because of the way math has been taught for the last 40 or 50 years in this country and other countries. They tend to, when you expose them to a graph, they kind of freak out and shut down. It's more of a psychological response. It's not that they're suddenly stupid. They're really smart people. But if you trigger them with a graph, a lot of times it just doesn't work. They just kind of shut down. So you got to find other ways to convey cause and effect relationships. And I think that in the same way that Tableau did this for data visualization, Tableau just has such beautiful visualization libraries, right?
Yeah.
I think that is very much where we are going on analytics, right? So we don't compete with Tableau. In fact, they're a Salesforce company, so we partner with them, right? We're kind of doing two different things that are highly complementary with each other. So, in terms of the future of Proof, that's kind of really, really tough for me, particularly as the CEO, to comment on, right? Where we'll be in 6 months or 12 or 24 months is really kind of anybody's guess in one sense, right? But I do think that we will continue to show really, really strong year-over-year growth.
Analytics is big right now. Very big.
It is. It really is. And
you already have a foothold there, which is nice. You're not a startup in that sense.
Yeah. And I think also, we have a reputation for really strong delivery, strong implementation of these tools. And so if you're an average, Salesforce sales guy, for example, and you've got a big deal cooking with 3 Salesforce clouds with this customer, right? And they say, oh, we need analytics, or we need an MRM, or, whatever it is, right? They know today that if they put us in the deal, that our part will be flawless. And that really means a lot. Our churn is very low historically, right? And we had customer success teams before we had sales teams.
Smart. So, especially if you had a lot of the inbound coming in because of referrals and people just word of mouth, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that sustainability also, and this is where analytics really interacts with real life, right? Sustainability is going to be the watchword for business over the next, say, 2 to 3, 4 years minimum, right? Sure. There was a post on LinkedIn yesterday talking about NRR, net retained revenue, right, as being kind of like the new really important metric for SaaS, right? And my response was, well, it's a really super important metric for SaaS, but it always has been, right? But when you could get away with spending way more money than you were making in revenue because you were being backfilled by investors, right? And now you can't. Now you have to be reasonably self-sustaining, all of a sudden NRR is center stage, right? But that doesn't mean that it wasn't before. And so I think that this is where you're going to see a very, very sober-minded approach to most businesses over the next, say, 1,000 to 1,500 days from now, and it's going to be very like there's a lot of functions. Marketing is a great example of this that are crap when it comes to making a business case, like literally formulating and delivering a business case that is compelling as to why the business should spend more money in this area and not less, right? I think
it's always the first budget that gets frozen when things go to crap, right? Which is ironic because it's really just the beginning of the end. You basically solidified your downward spiral.
That's right.
Like, and that's one thing that I think bigger companies, like the companies that made it through COVID, they doubled down instead of like they went for broke. Don't get me wrong. They rolled the dice, doubling down on marketing and sales when everybody was stopping what they were doing was either going to make them the biggest in the industry when they popped out the other end, or they were going to be bankrupt, right? The ones who did it ended up becoming the biggest in the industry, it turned out. And that's what was, everyone else just froze and just stood there like a deer in the headlights, you know, and they got hit by the car, right? And, you know, that was I made some videos about this actually in the beginning parts of COVID about doubling down, like how we were doing it. And this is how we suggest clients do it. And it wasn't self-serving. It was like, listen, you hire anyone you want, just you should be doing this, because the second you decide that pipeline is frozen, you have a count on a down of 3 to 6 months before you are an unrecoverable flat spin, right? Like there's just nothing's going to save you essentially, right? And so it's an interesting point, especially when you bring up NRR, because so many companies that I saw, again, the nitrous was in the tank and it was just blowing their hair back. It didn't matter that they were there was leakage and they're bleeding from other, as long as they're going fast and straight, it didn't matter. But churn kills, right? And when you hit a wall like COVID,
churn is lethal.
It is tough, but not while things are great. And so that's why it gets so overlooked. When things are great, you're like, yeah, I'm bleeding 20%, but I'm making 200 on this. So whatever, right? And then, but then once that train stops, all that catches up with you. And one of the best books I ever read, it was called Never Lose a Customer Again. And I try to remember the author, and it kills me. I'd look it up here for the audience in a second. But and I remember that book. The whole point of that book was about how to retain, because essentially, and then it went into the math of it. First, it went in just to the ethics of it, like, you know, treat the customers well, and then it went into a little bit of a referral basis, like, hey, you'll even make more money because they'll refer people to you. But then it like dug deep into just the basic math. Like, listen, the amount of money you're spending to attain a new client, you could spend 1/10 of that to retain a current one. Absolutely. So what's the point of getting a new $20,000 client if you lost a $20,000 client last month? All you did was actually break even. But if you're looking forward, you're like, yeah, we got a new client, and you forget that you lost one. So all that money and effort you put into the new one is more money than if you had just spent that time retaining the last one, right? And when you get that system down internally in your company, you are so bulletproof for these, you know, these black swan events, essentially, right? You know, do you have to take a step back? Would you maybe take a gut punch? Sure, we did, but we're still here. It's because we had those processes in place, you know?
Well, I think what I would say about that is that there's two things. One is what you spend the money on. So even it's not just about doubling down, it's about figuring out what the levers are that are working and what's not really working in the current environment could work in a different environment, right? Yeah. And so if you look at our clients from 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, same company, right? What was working in each of those 4 years, you know, predominantly dominated by COVID, right? Mm-hmm. Was very different, year to year to year, right? And so they were able to use proof to identify what was falling off a cliff in terms of a particular channel and divest from that faster, and then move that money over here, right? And so
pivoting. The ability to pivot. I mean, we had to pivot too, Right. Like I mean, we've always done tech marketing for tech companies for the most part, right? Because I'm just a Bay Area nerd originally, hacking AOL when I was 12, like in my dad's basement. Like that's my villain origin story, right? Uh, but we did everything for them, right? When COVID hit, a lot of things became really relevant, right? Like what's the point of pitching a 9-month SEO plan to a company that doesn't know if they're going to be in business in 3 months?
That's right.
Right. So everything we did, we had to pivot, and we sliced off like 80% of our services. We just dialed down to appointment setting specifically, because we realized is at the end of the day, for enterprise level tech, the only thing that matters is more appointments on that calendar for their sales team. That's it. Anything that gets it there, they don't care how it got there. They don't care. They don't care if you push a big red button and an appointment hits. They're like, fine, whatever. We don't care if you're cold calling. We don't care if you're emailing. That is where we start our process to sell. And that's where our bread and butter is. And we shaved off everything that didn't basically shortcut to that exact endpoint, right? Because again, and we advise our clients too. We're like, listen, like, you need to shave stuff off if you have to pivot towards this, because it's a whole new world now. And the thing is, the trauma set in. Right. So even though COVID is essentially over, in its large scale, right? It'll be like the cold flu or whatever. It'll keep going forever, but not on that scale where it shuts down the country or the world. But the trauma set in. The people who are running companies, and me and you, we're never going to forget that. We're never going to treat our business the same ever again. Like it'll take a whole nother generation to go, we're never going to go again. Right. Like that's, you look at the Depression in the 20s or in the early 1900s, there was great grandparents of mine, great grandparents that still had money in their mattress because they didn't trust the banks, because you can tell them all you want that the FDIC insures their money and that it's digital and it's fine. It doesn't matter. Tell that to the person who was standing in line with a run on the banks and in bread bowl lines, right? Like you can't undo that experience, right? But I think that that's actually a good thing for a lot of businesses, because we are on such a high. It was just like stratosphere, launch to the moon, no looking back. And, that's just kind of a house of cards at some point, right? And COVID was a really good wake-up call. And I think it actually took out a certain percentage of businesses that I think it should. I think we were overinflated on a lot of industries, and the quality became less because you just had so much volume. So, there's a correction that happened there a little bit. So I think that was really cool. Before we go, there is one.
Well, actually, one thing I just wanted to say real fast.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this goes to the churn thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a marketer and you're basing your budgets, your spend levels on LTV, right? But you've got a high churn business.
That's not a good equation.
That's really a bad equation. But you have no idea how common that is.
Oh, I'm very aware of COVID. I watch it every day, but you're right. Most people don't.
No, I wasn't really talking about you. I was talking about your audience has no idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, you see that a lot with these, especially with the startup software companies who get big investments from Silicon Valley, right? It's just all nitrous, and they're going for, they're going for the user acquisition, quick, and showing these graphs and stuff. But it's like, dude, back here you're leaking bad, right? Like you can't have this. You can't do a quarter mile, right? Drag race if you're leaking transmission fluid out the back. At some point, your engine will blow. It'll be close to the finish line, and then everyone else is going to pass you, right? That's the straight analogy right there. So, but I want to switch gears for one last question for you.
Yeah.
I want to know a little about you personally here. So I gave you a little quick idea of my little villain origin story, right? As a kid, what did you want to do when you grew up? Like when you were a kid or a teenager, like what was your goal? And then is this it, or was it something else? And if so, how did it transition to this, right?
Yeah, no, I'd have to say that I am very eclectic in terms of my background, right? I started out as a journalist and then as a political speechwriter in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And then basically, this is a long time ago now, and was really good at it, but started to feel very icky a lot, right?
Yeah, it'll weigh on you.
And so I decided I was get out of that, and I leaped out of the frying pan into the fire, so to speak, by joining large agencies, right? And then it's been a constant process of kind of like levering up, right? Which is whatever everyone really does, right? But so I went brand side, and I kind of never went back. I stayed in very large companies and became extremely senior, C-suite type person in large companies. And then I got to a place where I kept on feeling that I had seen this movie before, over and over and over. And the people were awesome. The people were never boring, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of the business scenarios started to get a little tropish, right? Sure. And so I was kind of like going, man, I feel like I'm stagnating, right? I really do. I feel like I am the frog in the boiling water, right? And I don't want to be the frog in the boiling water. I mean, I'm not a kind of person who will probably ever retire, not because I can't, but because I don't want to, right? I mean, the idea of playing golf 4 times a week and doing a little bit of charity on the side is just kind of,
it's not enough.
Not even remotely enough.
You gotta have purpose, creativity, an outlet for it at all times.
And so, I had done everything that I had really wanted to do with analytics inside of large corporations. And that had taken me the better part of 15 years to scale that ladder. I'm probably one of way less than 10, probably less than 5 B2B CMOs who could say that they've done what I've done in terms of linking all of that go-to-market to business impact in a way that the board says, yeah, I believe that, right? And so I just saw this opportunity. One of the things I would say is that life is not about swinging for the bleachers as much as it is solid record of singles and doubles over and over and over again, right? You look at great baseball players, the ones with really high batting averages, those averages are built on singles and doubles.
Moneyball. It's Moneyball. It's
totally Moneyball.
4 runs gets four base hits gets a run in 2. Always swinging for the fences is actually not overall a great strategy.
That's right. And so actually Proof has automated Moneyball from a certain perspective. I mean, if you want to kind of make it super conversational, right?
Yeah.
That's really what it is. And so, but it's not the only idea that I have, and so where I'm going with this is that a lot of founders tend to try to maximize an exit. So let's just say an exit presents itself, right? And they will a lot of times turn it down because it's not 25x or whatever it is, right? And I think that what that says more than anything is that they feel like that this is whatever this is their only great idea.
Yep.
And if they don't get if they don't leverage it to its absolute max in the exit, then they're screwed, right?
Because it's it for them. Yeah. A old friend of mine once told me money now is always better than money later, because if you're a creative person, you will be able to leverage the money now into more money than you would have gotten later on that same deal, essentially.
Totally agree.
But to your point, if you're honest with yourself and you unicorned on accident,
oh yeah, sure.
Maybe it is better to do it to go for the big exit, because if you don't really have another, trick in the bag, then
one of the things that Dave Cody at Honeywell taught me, to really focus on is not statistical possibilities, but probabilities.
Probabilities, exactly.
Right?
Anything is possible. Very few things are probable.
Right. And if we just look at unicorns as a percentage of the total, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about a very, very, very small
It's literally why they call them unicorns. Like the name should give you a tip as to how rare and impossible that almost is, right?
Yeah, and how much luck is involved, right? How much of that whole thing is outside of anyone's control?
Yeah, accidental timing, market shifts, technology, politics, legal stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So many things factor into it. Mark, this was awesome having you on here really quick though, but I want to know first, how can the audience reach the company specifically? And then how can anyone maybe at the higher level, if it's another CEO of another, tech company that's trying to work with you or whatnot, how can they reach you personally? Anything you're comfortable giving?
Sure, absolutely. So proofanalytics.ai is the URL for Proof. So if you want to learn more about what we're doing, that's the place that I would certainly encourage you to go first. There's also a lot, you alluded to this earlier, there's a lot of podcasts out there where I'm talking or other people at Proof are talking. So there's a lot of, let's call them third-party sources of information.
Well, they could just search your name on Spotify, by the way, for anyone listening, because if you put Mark Stouse, Stouse, in Spotify, it'll pull up any episodes you're on also. Right. So it'll show all the different podcasts and that your episodes are. I do that when I'm trying to follow certain people as well. So that's a way they can find you.
Yeah. And then I'm been accused of being hyperactive on on LinkedIn, right? And so if you want to reach me, either out in the open, which I don't mind, or
wild,
or a private message through LinkedIn, either one is great. You don't have to be another CEO or another senior person. I will respond. If you're trying to sell me something that's clearly not for me, I'm not going to respond.
Fair. Okay? Fair enough.
Right. But if it's a genuine thing, even if you have no intention of buying anything from Proof, right, I'm happy to get to know you a little bit. Right. So totally, in fact, I don't sell a lot on LinkedIn because I realized that I can either sell on LinkedIn or I can help people on LinkedIn.
Providing value is better.
Right. Can't do both.
Especially for your position. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, it's for everyone listening out there. Again, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give it that 5-star review, put some writing behind it, so other techies like us can find it and enjoy all these amazing and helpful B2B softwares and platforms on the market today. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Hey, thanks, man.
All right. Have a good one.